Before we get into today's episode, I want to ask you a quick favour. If you're getting value from any of our podcasts, and I genuinely hope you are, could you take just 30 seconds right now and leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify? It sounds like a small thing, but a rating would make a huge difference, and it'll take less time than pouring a cup of coffee. G'day. Welcome to the AgriCoach Podcast for families on the land who want to grow their family's wealth and prosperity across the generations. I'm your host, Ben Law, and I'm the financial bloke. G'day. Welcome back to the Wealth and Wisdom Podcast. I'm Ben Law, and I'm the financial bloke. End of financial year is fast approaching, and I want to give you a sense of what the top producers are actually doing. The high-performing families, the ones who aren't scrambling around in June just before the end of financial year. Because here's what I see. Most rural producers treat tax like a once-a-year event. May or June rolls around, they call their accountant, try and figure out if they should buy some equipment, prepay a few expenses, or shuffle some money around. But the families who are genuinely getting ahead, they're doing something completely different. They're not waiting until the last minute. They've got a rhythm, a plan. They're working with their accountant and the rest of their professional advice team consistently throughout the year, not just when the deadlines hit. And to help you understand what this actually looks like, I'm bringing back someone who works with these families every day. Sarah Becker is a chartered accountant and a director of Becker Co in Rockhampton with her sister, Alexandra, a firm that's been looking after New South Wales and Queensland rural families for multiple decades and was started by her parents. She's also a mum of two, heavily involved in the rural community and part of her family grazing operation, and also Noongar grazing with her husband Rob. Sarah was one of my very first guests back in episode 8, where we talked about how her family approached bringing the next generation back into the business as both a professional advisor, but also with her own family. If you haven't heard that one, go back and listen. It's episode 8 and it's gold. But today we're tackling something different. What high performers actually do with their accountants throughout the year. Not just the tactics, but the approach, the planning, the decisions that separate the families who are building wealth from the ones who are just getting by. Sarah, it's great to have you back on the podcast.
Hello, Ben. Great to be back here.
Yeah, when we're recording this, we're just starting the run up to end of financial year, which I know accountants are busy all year round, but I know this just starts to ramp up with getting things done. So I really appreciate you coming on and investing a little bit of your time today.
Thank you for having me here with you, Ben.
So Sarah, now for anyone who didn't catch episode number 8, which is, I think we're about 110 now, so that was a kind of a long time ago, can you just give us a quick snapshot of where you're at now? And I mean family, the accounting practice, the grazing operation, etc., just so people can understand the world that you're currently operating in.
So, Ben, I am a mother. I am a wife. I am a daughter. I am a sister. I am a grazier. I am a chartered accountant and trusted business advisor. And essentially, I'm a person that loves all things rural and regional Australia, and in particular, Queensland. I can't deny that part of it. So when I last spoke to you, that was 5 years ago. I just had my son, William, and William has now started school. But Rob and I have, April last year, welcomed our gorgeous little girl, Isabel Agnes, into the world. Her name is actually a tribute to both of my grandmothers, who were, I should say, very strong, independent and capable women ahead of their time. And Isabel was a 3.5-year journey, Ben, but I am a better person because of that journey. So then I said I'm a grazier. So my husband, Rob, and I, we own and lease about 16,000 acres in Central Queensland and have a beef cattle farming operation in the Dawson Valley. And to be honest, Ben, that is what drives us for our day jobs. We want an operation where our children, even though they're only 5 and 10 months, can be a part of something bigger in the future. And that's what drives us on our day-to-day side of things. So which leads me to being a chartered accountant and a trusted business advisor. So December last year, I celebrated 20 years within the firm.
You probably shouldn't tell people that because you don't look it, Sarah.
Thank you, Ben. And I can't remember when we last spoke, but my sister and I bought our father out of the business 5 years ago. And next year, the firm celebrates 40 years in business.
Wow.
So Becker Co is a rural and business advisory firm. And to be honest, I feel really lucky that I get to work with all these beautiful client bases and the team members that are within it. So really, Ben, I'm just a professional who loves everything family and everything rural.
Super mum.
Not super. Just doing it.
I appreciate that. And you've got a lot of hats that you're actually wearing. And so that gives you the ability to be able to relate to most of your clients, because you're not only coming from an advisor and a professional accountant, but also from a producer yourself.
Agreed. And I think that's why I love what I do so much, because I can combine, as I said, you think about it, it's a list, what I just said, but the reality is they actually all play in together. And that's the part that I love it, that I can hopefully try and roll it into one, as I said, with the amazing team that we've got here and the clients that we've got, able to work on that all together.
So you must have multiple families within the accounting practice that have been dealt with by your dad and now yourself. So you've actually worked across the generations with families as well as yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's probably, every firm has their pros and their cons and their strength, but probably without even realizing it, we subconsciously, transition from one generation to the next generation. And reality is Jim will always have that history of the client group. But as you said, I've now been here for 20 years, so that's a fairly long time. Let's hide the grey hairs and what have you. But also, too, it means that they've had that seamless transition without even realising that it's occurred. Jim is always still available and what have you. And as I said, I've been here for 20 years, so that's now I consider that a fairly long time as well. And we've got other team members that have celebrated 12 years, 15 years, 10 years, all those big milestones. And then new team members too, because we have to keep growing, which is a beautiful thing as well. But yeah, it enables us to seamlessly work through those intergenerational family groups.
And so you've actually personally done succession within the accounting practice, but also within the family grazing operations too, haven't you?
Yeah, we have. And it's not something that happened overnight. Well, I don't think it came from a place of entitlement or anything like that, which I think is starting to become, unfortunately, a little bit common. But yeah, it was something that just evolved over time. We did the apprenticeship that I know you have spoken about many times. We were on the ground, we were the trainees. We did our apprenticeship into, team members and then management and then, executive management and then into business owners. It was just something that evolved over time.
That would be the way it should happen. Most people think mistakenly is that succession or transition between generations is an event, that it just happens. Everyone comes around the table, we have a discussion, you get this, I get this, I'm retiring or I'm coming back on farm, and then it's all done and dusted. But really, you've talked about over, 15, 20 years, you've been moving towards that ultimate transition.
At the end of the day, I would say it's part of the business growth. We are the members within that business. And to me, family always has to come first. But at the end of the day, it was the evolution of the businesses as to where the management and the ownership of those businesses would be. I just think the reality is that rural just puts that element of personal, for some reason it's more personal than, say, a supermarket or a service station or something like that.
Or accounting firm.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things that, I think you've got to flip it around and go, it's just the growth cycle of a business.
Perfect. Now, your main role, or the one that you spend most of your time with professionally, is the accounting firm. And so I know that you work with some of the top rural producers in, say, Queensland and New South Wales. Now, from your point of view, when you look at families that are sort of genuinely building something they'd be proud of and they're making that last across the generations, what are they doing with their accountants throughout the year that most people aren't? I mean, are they just coming in 30 June or the 1st of June saying, what do we got to do? Or are they doing something different?
Love this question. I think we as their accountant as a part of the team that's working towards their strategic goals. So the first thing that these family businesses have that maybe others don't is they have goals. They are defined, stepped out, broken down into time frame relevance, and then really into task in order to achieve that bigger picture. Because or else you really only got a dream. And I love it when businesses have goals, but then the personal family members have their own goals as well. Because really money is only one thing, Ben. I strongly believe the concept that the family has to come first. And if you are personally growing and developing yourself as a human, then you, which the business is a part of that, is the ultimate winner of that. And I think in that, it's then understanding the concept of why. If we can understand why these businesses and why is it these families are wanting to get something done, if we have that knowledge of that why, to me, it all kind of makes sense in relation to the bigger picture of things. So kind of breaking that down, we're on the bus. So we are just one team member that's sitting on this bus. So to me, the bus should probably include, your accountant, your lawyer, your insurance broker, if you want them to be there, your banker, and then other businesses, advisors and consultants. So whether that's someone like yourself or someone that's even more that farm gate relevance kind of thing. So it's bringing together that team and everyone realizing that they're on this bus. When people are on this bus, someone who I work quite closely with is always wisely saying to me, they've got to get it, want it, and have capacity. So once everyone's on this bus, as you are always drumming on about, Ben, you have to be proactive rather than being reactive. So once everyone's on the bus and there's going to be decision making or goal setting and working towards things, when you're working through those things, I think each team member should respectfully, but probably be pushing that people or, having that robust, respectful conversation. But once that decision is made, you are united and you are all moving forward together. One of the biggest things is that ego is not welcome, neither should self-interest. And then, the hardest part of it all is actually then consistency. Consistently showing up, breaking down those goals and working towards it, annually, quarterly, monthly, actually showing up each day. Because I strongly believe that it is those 1%ers, those game changers, when you compound them over time, that is where the real impact makes. And if you don't believe me, believe Paul Kelly when he said, from little things, big things grow. I know, very cliche, but it's actually really true. And then above all of that, you actually need the discipline to just keep working your way through it, because it isn't rocket science. It's actually just breaking it down.
It's interesting, Sarah, is my question that first pops into mind is this planning or these goals, are these led by mum and dad, or should the next generation be involved?
I actually think both, because I think respect works on multiple different levels. So I think you have the wiser older generation that are there and probably seen a lot of things. I think there's the hunger and the want possibly from the younger generation. But I probably go back to that concept of the bus. You've actually all got to be on the bus. So you actually all have to, I know you could say there can only be one driver of the bus, but in this instance, there may only be, you could have a virtual driver in this day and age, to be honest. The reality is, if you actually all aren't on the bus and reading off the same page and respectfully respecting your differences, but working towards that bigger thing. So I actually think there has to be a want from all parties in order to get on it and move it forward, because or else you're actually just still in the shed.
The farming families who get succession right don't stumble into it. They're thinking about it 5 or 10 years out, long before anyone's close to retiring. And they're quietly asking, how do we do this? Who can actually help us do it well? The High Performing Families Roadmap Workshop was built for exactly that family. We sold out 4 events in 2025, and in 2026, I've only got capacity to run 1. It's the 26th and 27th of August here on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. Early bird pricing is available now, but it won't last long. If you're already thinking this way, now's the time to act. Grab your tickets at agricoach.com.au/take action. That's agricoach.com.au/take action. Now, let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, because what I've seen, Sarah, and I'm keen to hear your take on this, but if the next generation's not brought along on the journey, they don't actually really feel like they're on the bus, or maybe don't want to be on the bus. So are these families actually saying, you know what, we might drive the bus, we might be in control of the bus, age dependent, but we need to bring that next generation along on the journey?
Yeah. I actually think it was my dad that actually once said the most successful clients he's ever seen is that your children walk behind you, they walk with you, and that your aim should be that they then walk in front of you. And I think, you can say, is that how it should be? But I actually think if you think about that, if you don't take them on that process, so it's the older generation's responsibility and the want to bring them on it, but then it has to be the want of that younger generation in order to walk side by side with mum and dad and even grandma and grandpa and whoever else is involved in it, to do your time there, to hopefully maybe keep going as mum and dad and, the grandparents enter that beautiful retirement era or that beautiful grandchildren era or whatever that may be. So I think it's a combination of all of the team members that are on this bus.
So are these families having those actual conversations, Sarah, do you find, or do people have to prompt them?
You could argue, do people know what they don't know? I think, again, the reality is any family's default position is to talk in operations.
Yep.
What are we doing tomorrow? What are we doing next week? What crop are we planting? What cattle, what bull are we putting in? All those kinds of things. That is everyone's sweet spot. To think strategically, I think people feel overwhelmed, or what does that even mean? You know what I mean? Like, as in for you and I that probably work on that level. But it's just taking the time to not work in the business, but work on the business. And everyone thinks you need these huge amounts of times or these grand plans or these amazing advisors and what have you. They're all out there, but you have to have the want to, if you don't know it, but have the want to be able to make that commitment and investment.
Do you think you can be successful not doing that and just luckily falling into success?
I actually do think that is a combination of it too. And that's why I think, well, actually, I don't know. They probably are strategically thinking without a written plan.
Yes.
And then maybe that's another thing, is that it is maybe all up here, but if it's only up here, who else knows what that is, or who else knows where that's going to go? So that's why I think it's the commitment to nut it all out, like get it all down. I personally think if you don't have a written plan, totally subject to change and totally subject to so many other points, but if you don't have that, I really just think you've got a dream.
And nobody's going to come on the journey with you.
I agree. And at the end of the day, what is a journey if you're not there to enjoy it along the way? And then I don't know about you, I really love my own time, but I really love being around my family and being with them on that journey as well.
I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, Sarah. You said something about family first. That's how your family has basically, you've been raised by your parents to think that way. And obviously your brother and your two sisters, you all think like that. Is that something you also see in those families that are doing really well and then sustaining it across the generations?
Yeah, I do. And if you put that thing where I said, what I put in my idealistic bus is ego. Ego is not welcome. I think at the end of the day, if that is present within a family, then you're actually not putting your family first, you're putting yourself first. So I think sometimes, they say like in any good negotiations, if no one feels like they've actually got their own way, it's actually a great outcome, because it means that no single person got their own way. And so I think in all of this, you have to remember that it's not about you, it's about your family. And I think, I don't know why, if someone knows the answer to this, why in the bush is that legacy and that family thing so prevalent? And you could say, is it a bad thing? But I actually think it's the most beautiful thing. Like Rob and I often say, as we've got a 10-month-old and a 5-year-old, and our weekends are spent out on our property, we can take them and be part. We do branding with them. We do, you should have seen it. I had the little ergo pouch with my little girl. She just was thriving off it back in January, February. It is one of the only businesses that you can take your family on that journey. I can't bring them down here. You know what I mean? Like, as in, well, I would love if they would do something. But, the reality is the bush is such a special thing. So let's turn that into a positive rather than this negativity that sometimes comes with this whole succession transition. What's mine? What's yours? Like, let's just put the family first.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, it's one of these things that family's the key to most of the success in the rural space, but it's also the kryptonite. It's the one area that causes so much angst and problems. And I think that's why when we start talking about, especially strong leaders that have done really, really well, and you start talking about, all your success has come from being a rugged individualist, doing it yourself, working your ass off, bullet a gate at everything, taking risks, and you feel like you've maybe done it on your own, then to all of a sudden say, oh no, now we've got to go back and we've got to focus on family, because that's where your success is going to be if you invest some time in that. They don't actually see an ROI for it directly.
Yeah.
You buy the neighbour's place, you clear the country, you get increased carrying capacity, then all of a sudden you see it in your bottom line or your balance sheet, and you're like, wow, that was worth it. As an accountant, when people don't invest in their family or doing the strategic planning, is there actually an ROI or a loss of ROI for not doing it?
I think it depends on the family group and what it is. Like return on investment, I would say, what's the value of having Christmas lunch together? You know what I mean? Like, as in, the wealth that has been created in the bush over this last decade is phenomenal, kind of thing. It's absolutely phenomenal. And I actually don't think it's going to stop, because they're making no more land. And you know what I mean? Like, it is, we won't even start talking about food security and all that kind of stuff in today's, global space. But I think what motivates people, probably for a lot of your top % performers, that, that tangible, my balance sheet went up this, my P&L did that. But why don't we start putting, and as I said at the beginning, like, goals around the business, but then personal? Why don't we start putting some measurables around your personal goals, personal growth, personal development, all these things, because then over time you start to see a return on that. Something that used to maybe make you anxious or nervous, or that you couldn't do, like, oh my God, I can't think strategically. What are Sarah and Ben talking about today? What is the return on yourself for investing in something that, may not be on the farm gate, or may not be some, data-driven thing, but, because I honestly believe your energy is then reflected into the business as well.
You would have seen that at Beef Week, the last Beef Week in Rockhampton I went to. I did a presentation up there, and I remember we had 200 or 300 graziers in the room, mostly from Central and Northern Queensland. And I remember I was talking with someone there, and I was saying, that the biggest measure of success in your family isn't your balance sheet. It's whether you can sit down and have Christmas dinner together and all enjoy it. And it was amazing when I looked out on the room, the amount of heads that were just aggressively nodding, absolutely. But it's a real cognitive dissonance within them is, we say family is the most important thing, but so many people act like the farm's the only thing worth saving.
Yeah.
And I think personally, what you've touched on today is the first place to start is planning. It's actually getting out of the operation stuff and sitting down and saying as a family, where are we now? Let's have a look at where we are now and where do we want to be? And as a family, then working out where do we want to be in, 1, 5, 10, 30 years. And then so what do we actually need to be doing, or what do we need to be avoiding over that time? And that starts with planning. And so I'd like to plant the seed for everyone that's listening here is to be able to go, okay, well, if you're sitting there going, look, what Sarah really says resonates with me, well, start planning. Start actually designing the life you want, or making your dreams come true, and then go, okay, what do we actually got to do? And actually stop just spending all your time operationally, because that's the easy route, isn't it?
It's the safe space. It is so, and everyone default. I still do it.
Yeah, me too.
I'll be talking to my husband and we'll be talking high level and what have you, and then suddenly we're talking about this, like we're trying to create, we have breakfast together most mornings when we're both in the same place. We're trying to not talk about logistics and planning. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, because that is the default position. What are the kids doing today? Where are you? Who's doing this? Pickups? Where's, all those things. Let's take it up. You know what I mean? Like, let's take it up. So I constantly want to keep growing. And I don't mean like, firm size necessarily, or not those financial things, but me as a person. Like as a mother, as a daughter, as a wife, all those things, as a sister. How do I keep being a better version of myself than yesterday?
I totally get it. And look, to be blunt, the next generation are very much thinking more like this than the current generation.
It's beautiful to see.
It is, yeah. So the next generation's actually asking some really beautiful questions. And I get the privilege of being able to see this. I've got 50 of the next generation in my group. So I got 50 sort of 16 through to 30-year-old younger men and women that are driven and motivated, and they're having the conversations. They want to know where they're going. They want to plan things. They want to be involved in the decision-making process, obviously with the respect of the current generation, etc.
I was about to say, get uncomfortable, but do it respectfully.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're wanting to learn, and they wanted to say, well, look, I don't necessarily want to burn the candle at both ends. I mean, one of the biggest things that resonated in our group recently is we did a session on burnout and bore out and maintaining that resilience across the times, especially with what's going on around the world at the moment. And, I think the next generation is really starting to think about that. So I would say if the current generation are actually saying, how do we get this next generation to not be entitled or to be engaged and understand? It's actually start doing the planning. So actually start to plan, sit down with their right people, and maybe they can do that themselves, or maybe they go out and have a chat with their accountant or their other professional advisor, say, hey, we need to start having these conversations, because I'm shocked, Sarah, how often when you see families that have got friction or challenges, or they've hit roadblocks in their business or their family, once they actually start talking strategically, a lot of those disappear.
I couldn't agree more. They've taken it up and are thinking outside, that grind. When you think about it, I really believe anything is possible if you put your mind and awareness to it.
Yeah. I've got 3 A's that I work through, Sarah, and I've talked about this a few times before, but number 1 is awareness. Like families don't know what they don't know, which you've already alluded to. Number 2 is alignment. So making sure we get all on the same page. Yes, you might have one person driving the bus, but we're all on the bus and we all know where we're going.
Yep.
Number 3 is then accountability, is making sure we all do what we say we're going to do, and we sort of raise those standards within the family and the business. And then obviously you start to become, over time and with patience and respect and experience, you start to become like a well-oiled machine.
Totally.
So this is the big message you've given so far, is you shouldn't be treating your accountant just like we come in at the end of financial year, move a few assets and cash around, buy some strainer posts, buy a new tractor, etc., to minimise tax. If you want to do this properly, what might a rhythm or a process look like for a family with their professional advisors? What should it look like in your eyes? Like, how are the top families doing it? Are they just doing, we end up at end of financial year and we're all done and dusted, or should we be doing something different?
I think if they've got these goals, at the end of the day, end of financial year just becomes an element of that, so to speak. So I think your non-negotiables are your, lead up to end of financial year and everything like that. So you've got your trust minutes, your farm management deposits, your super deductions, inter-entity items, and then your other compliance. But I think it's always about how are you turning, let's call it that end of financial year, around into a more positive and productive time for the business. So I always think, and this is part of this rhythm and ongoing or side of things, and maybe use 30th of June as that example, but use it as a time to go, right, well, I think the first thing is reflection in relation to how have we gone this year, or how have we gone this past period of time, you know what I mean? Like, I think celebrate the wins. I think sometimes we focus too much on the negatives and not the positives. So celebrate the wins. What worked? What didn't? Did we achieve our goals? Did we not achieve our goals? Did we not have any goals? And then once I think you've reflected on what has happened, it's then forward thinking. So as part of that strategic longer term things, but then think about what do we want to achieve in the next 12, 24, 36, 48 months, even beyond that? Because let's be honest, Ben, ag is a slow game. And if I had $1 for every time someone said to me, I can't plan for the future because I don't know what Mother Nature is going to do, I agree with it, but I don't agree with it.
You understand it, but you don't agree with it.
Because let's focus on what we can control. Because the reality is, those families that are being proactive about it all, the reality is we can't control Mother Nature, and right now we can't control anything that's really going on around the world. But hey, that's okay. If we've got our strategic goals that are broken down into these bite-sized little pieces, the reality is that we're steering and leading as to where, the achievement of those goals. And sure, things are totally subject to change, and they probably should change, because as you're finding that rhythm and that, that accountability and all those, I love that AAA, breakdown. The reality is that you may go, you know what, actually this has changed. Let's now work on this. But if you're focusing on what you can control as opposed to what you can't control, you'll be surprised what you can actually get in and work towards. Because if we take that back, and I know we're not talking about end of financial year, but we're kind of talking about end of financial year. If your business is working towards a bigger thing, no denial tax becomes part of that, but it's not the center point of it. It is just an element of it. Full stop.
And so you need to have that regular rhythm throughout the year where you are having those regular conversations so that so the end of financial year becomes one of many conversations. And it's essentially, by the end of the year, would it be fair to say that you're almost putting a rubber stamp on the end of financial year plan at the end, not coming in and rushed to put a plan in place on, the 15th of June?
Correct. The reality is at any point in time, you should know how your business is tracking. So this end of financial year, if you don't know how your business is actually performing or doing, well, the reality is by the 15th of June, that year is done. Even conversations in, March, April, people know what cattle they're selling. They know what crops they've planted, all those kinds of things. That year is done. It's just probably shaping, where things may fall or lay out. But again, if we go back to that goal setting, this is where, to me, it's about pushing your clients in relation to, let's look beyond that, because this is done. What's happening next year? What's happening, that 12, 24, 36, 48? What is that bigger thing that we're working towards? Because let's not just focus on this, I almost call it imaginary line that's been created, called end of financial year. Your accountant should be creating value to your business. And compliance is your non-negotiable. You have to get in and do that. You need a solid foundation on that so you can then see the growth, see the opportunities, because you need that right, because or else you actually don't have correct data. But the reality is if that's in place, it's just part of this ongoing growth, development. Sometimes it's sitting still, and that's not a bad thing. That can be, a planned thing.
Yeah, a pause is still a strategy.
Totally. And there could be different stages, you know what I mean? Like if you've just had children, or, you're going through succession or something like that. So it's not the time to go, bolt on another property or another lease block or, whatever it is. So, there's different times for different things. But again, it shouldn't be this, I think it's that reactive versus proactive approach. I think it, in a nutshell is the reality of it, and then you spoke about that rhythm. So if we go back to and how often you should be talking about it, the reality is with your accountant, sure, talk about those operational end of financial year items. Sure, get in and do that.
Because they're the non-negotiables.
Totally. And you need to do them. If you don't do them, you're actually running a bad business at the end of the day because you're being highly reactive. But where can that value piece lie in that, on the bus concept in relation to that rhythm? And the other thing, which I love that you raised that accountability piece, because at the end of the day, finding that rhythm is about that consistency and discipline and accountability. And I would say the reality is your advisors can't be there present every time you're going to speak strategically and, goal focus kind of thing. We're not always available. And the reality is you should be able to, with help maybe initially, find that rhythm and that consistency with it all. But your key advisors or your bus team members should be there for those key items throughout the year. So is that annually, half yearly, quarterly, like what is it? Because I think for every different family group, it's actually going to be different. I don't think it should be just a one shoe fits all kind of approach in that sense. But I think the biggest thing to consider when you're starting this, don't get paralyzed by perfection and just start. Literally start today. Take the time to, as I said, work on the business, not in the business, and just start with a 1% game changer goal. Honestly, it will make you feel so much better. So I then think the question of rhythm comes down to accountability. What does your family or your business need in order to find that rhythm? Do you need that accountability piece in order to find that rhythm? Because then it becomes natural.
And that will change too. I mean, within our business, we call it a communication pulse. And so the example we give all our families, for some of you, if you think about a patient and they come into the hospital and they've got, the pulse is regular and consistent, you've got a healthy patient. If you've got a erratic pulse, the patient's not going to be doing real well. And it's the same for the family. If you don't have this regularly and consistent, and now if you decide you're under stress or you've got a lot going on, you need to increase the pulse. So, maybe 6 monthly is okay. Maybe it needs to be quarterly or 6 weekly. And then times when things are going really, really well and you're laying on the couch eating chips, watching a movie, the pulse lowers. Maybe you don't need to do them as often, but that consistency, whatever it is so important. And Sarah, if you don't mind, one thing that I found really helpful too is that end of financial year discussion. And this is a really interesting one and it opens a real can of worms for families, but I think it's a really good strategic way of doing it. And I wrote a blog about it recently, and it's starting to have a conversation about if we do have a profit, whether it be $100,000 or $10 million, what are we actually going to do with it?
Yeah.
Because the default in families is just to reinvest back into the business and keep going again. And so I normally talk about 4 buckets, which is, you've got mum and dad's retirement. So should we be pulling money out and setting us up for mum and dad's or the current generation's retirement? Because that's going to be a succession issue down the track. Number 2 is the obvious one, is debt reduction. Should we be reducing debt? Number 3 is, should we be putting it back into the business for growth? Buy some machinery, put some more fencing in, whatever it might be. And then the last one, which is a beautiful conversation to be had, is what about dividends?
Yeah.
What about paying money out to family members that are involved in the business to actually not necessarily reward, but to help them then build their own wealth? And that's a really interesting conversation that I would be flagging is if you are going and sitting with your accountant, is actually raise the issue of, well, what are we going to do with the profits? Now, you might decide you're going to throw it all back into the business again. don't care. But that conversation, especially with the next generation, might raise some really important conversations that you haven't been having, like mum and dad's retirement, like debt reduction, like dividends, etc. And it will be uncomfortable for a lot of current generations.
I love uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah. Well, that's what the gold is.
In that sense. And I think that's a really good point, because at the end of the day, I think, again, the default is to just put it back in and do something. That's your ops default. But again, as you said, with those 4 buckets, which is great, let's step back. What longer term, and if we've got goals that we're longer term working towards, what is actually going to be better in order to achieve some of those? What a decision now helps us achieve one of those longer term goals, rather than the here and now, the 30th of June, I almost want to say silly deadline, you know what I mean? Let's think beyond that.
Yeah. Sarah, when you're working with families, and let's say you get new ones come to you, what are some key things that you see that families make as a mistake when they're dealing with their accountant?
One of the things I think with our clients in the relationship, the biggest things is very strong trust between the accountant and the client. And that's got to work both ways. So I think if that element of the relationship is not there, I don't think you'll succeed and produce outcomes that probably the client in their instance really wants to get in and achieve. So I think let's flip the mistakes. Let's flip it around to like a positive things, as to, like, I feel like I've been saying the same things, consistently grow, all these kinds of things. But 3 simple things I think is trust. Get on the bus and same thing, work with that. Be proactive and not reactive. Again, a really simple thing, but like actually action it. And as I said, think big and just start thinking differently. Let's think of those 4 buckets. Let's think of things that you haven't thought of before. Because the reality is, if you've got the right team and you're consistently showing up, you will get in and make things happen. But take your advisor as part of that journey. Because if we don't know that why or that side of things that you're working towards, all we're working with is what we see, from a compliance and let's call it your bread and butter, your debits and your credit side of things. So don't make that a mistake of just thinking that your accountant is there to do your BASs and your tax returns. Let them get them to help you be part of it. And as I said, make sure that they're adding value to your business and have that simple concept of get it, want it, and have capacity. Because if they don't, they may not be, depending on who you are, they may be not essentially part of your team without you knowing that they're not part of your team. And I think if I break that down, let's go into ops for a second kind of thing in that sense, but then lift it back out. I think the reality is if you don't have your building foundation strong, which is your bookkeeping and your compliance side of things, you need either a family member or someone that is totally on top of that. I reckon it's best practice to be making sure that everything is reconciled and you're looking at those sides of things, as in the designated team member, on a weekly basis. Don't make it overwhelming. I'm all about bringing it into bite-sized pieces so that it doesn't become this overwhelming and this major thing to do. But if you've got that building foundation strong, watch out what you can grow and the opportunities that present themselves without even knowing it, because you know your business. And make sure your accountant and advisors know your business and trust. I think that word is used a lot today, but if there's not trust, there's actually no relationship.
I love the word alignment, because this is the thing I've learned is someone can be really trustworthy. So you can have, I'll use an example of an accountant, and they'll say, my accountant, he's a really great bloke, or she's a top lady and she would always do the right thing and she's good at doing my books and I never have to worry about the tax department knocking on my door and asking. But they might not be the right fit for your business, and I saw one, like I get the benefit of working with the families that I do, and we do family advisory boards, and we sit in the room with accountants and financial advisors and bankers and the family and look at where are we going, what are we doing, etc. And one of the things that shows up is you can have a really competent professional advisor, but they're not on the same page. They don't buy into your long-term vision. I saw one the other day and you could just see the clients were driven and motivated and the next generation was coming in and everyone was excited about the future, and the accountant was just a real negative Nancy. Oh, well, this is wrong. Now you want them to point out the flaws. Absolutely. They're there to be able to point out things. You don't want yes men or yes women surrounding you, but you could just see they just weren't on the journey.
They didn't get it.
Yeah, they didn't get it. And you could say, hey guys, like when you look at this, are they going to get you from where you are to where you want to be to achieve your dreams? And it was lucky. It was a 21 29-year-old son just looked at me and said, Ben, not a chance.
Yeah.
And so sometimes there's that alignment. Are they on the same page as you? And to be very kind to accountants too, I've sat in the rooms doing these where we present the family's 10 years plan, and the accountant looks in the room, he or she, and goes, wow, I had no idea. I know where you're going now. This makes sense. Oh, whenever you've been saying we want to pay a little tax to pay off debt, and I've been pushing you to pay less tax, I can see how that's a contradiction. And so if you actually bring your accountant in, sometimes they actually flourish, and you could be thinking, oh, my accountant's not up to scratch. It might just mean that you've not asked them.
Yep. The journey works both ways, doesn't it?
Does, yeah. And sometimes for I'm sure accountants, I know back when I was financial advising years ago, is sometimes you look at the families and go, I'm not aligned with them. This isn't working for me. Maybe I need to find them someone else. So as we run up towards the end of the podcast, if someone's sitting here now, it's coming up towards the end of financial year, what you've said absolutely resonates with them, and they're about to head in and go see their accountant, or they know they need to, what should they be doing right now in your eyes?
Engagement with your accountant kind of thing. Making sure you know where your business is at, because as I said, none of this should be a surprise as to where you're sitting at. You should know exactly where your business is at and how it's been performing this year. Make sure you get your non-negotiables done. Just get in and get them done. But as I said, keep pushing that. What is the value part? Like, let's look beyond this 30th of June deadline. Let's work on that engagement, that journey both ways. I hope this conversation prompts some people to say, did you know this is what we're working towards, or this is what, or, for an accountant to maybe go, actually, you know what, I'm going to push my client. Why do they always say that each year? How can I, let's really change that conversation towards not 30th of June deadline. Where's the business at? Where does it want to be going? How do we all get on this bus and make sure that we're delivering on what both parties are actually wanting to achieve? And as you said, if there's not the alignment there, where to next?
Yeah, I agree. And some people will be saying with petrol price or diesel prices and fertilizer, and it's been a bad year because of dry or wet or whatever, we're probably not going to have a big tax issue. I don't need to contact my accountant. It'd have to be a bloody good time to be planning, because if you've got a year like with FMDs and CGT rollover relief with small business requirements, even if you're not going to have a big tax problem, this is probably a great time to have a conversation. Would that be right?
Yeah, exactly right. And if we're talking about the journey, the reality is tax is just an element of that. So if that is not an element of conversation required for this financial year, what are the other conversations that we need to be having? Do we need to be resetting the longer term picture, or, the next 12 months goal? Do we need to, as I said, lead and change those conversations because of what has happened, or because we think this is going to happen as well? So as I said, this financial year is done. It was done actually 6 months ago. So I was going to say, what is that next year looking like? Because that is now where the conversation should be forward thinking and forward communicating to both sides.
Take action now, like you said, small steps, progress, not perfection, and start getting out of the business.
Just start.
Yeah, whatever size business you operate. Sarah, where can people find more about you online?
Our website, Becker Co. You got to put the QLD, because there's a beautiful coffee store down in New South Wales that has Becker Co. Becker Co QLD. You'll find us, and then on there you'll see, it's quite a descriptive website, and then on there it has all of my contact details and all about the history, who we are, what we are, and our gorgeous team members.
Now, I've got one last question, which I know you've been hanging out for, Sarah, because I gave you a couple of questions in advance, because you are a preparer, just like myself. Any last words for anyone before we go into the last question? Any little tips, anything that you'd like to leave us that we haven't covered?
I honestly believe that anyone's dream can become a reality. So I was going to say, I would be saying, if this seems overwhelming, just literally break it down. And as I said, just focus on that 1% game changer, because it will honestly start something that will compound, and you will be so surprised as to where you will find yourself.
From little things, big things come.
Can we have some Paul Kelly background music?
I'm not as advanced as that. Now, Sarah, this is a question I love to ask people, and I always find it fascinating, the responses we get. And I do this because it's always great to reflect, which is what you mentioned before, and think about our younger selves. But I think it's also good for the next generation who are out there, who are in their 20s, to actually hear from people that have been through it and say, if I had my time again. Because I love that. My dad, to give some context, Sarah, is when I was a kid, my dad used to take me along to bull sales and things like that, and he'd sit me on a post while he was off checking things out with some old guy who was probably my age now, and he'd just leave me and he'd say, talk to old Mr. Law and ask him if he had his time again, what would he do? And of course, I'd ask those things, and I'd be one of those annoying little kids. Why? What did you do? And I still do it to this day. So from your point of view, if you could go back in a time machine and you could have a coffee or a glass of wine or whatever it is back in those days and talk to a young Sarah, what's the bit of advice you'd actually give her?
Yeah, as you gave me this question. So, and I think I said on our pre-chat that this is the question that I was actually really struggling with.
Yeah.
So now that I'm a corporate hippie, I took time to reflect on this. And you know what, Ben? I actually wouldn't change a thing. I honestly believe everything happens for a reason. And I say that in both good and bad, unfortunately. And I strongly believe that the universe actually has my back. So reflecting on that, I think your 20s are messy, right? Like it's all about, you don't really know who you are. And I don't think longer term you really know what's important to you. Then you hit your 30s and you're getting out of that mess and you're figuring out who you are and thinking, in that relation to what longer term actually matters to you. And then, Ben, I hit my 40s and I reckon I am in my best era yet. So what I would say to 25-year-old Sarah is enjoy the journey. Remember to be grateful for everything that you have and everything that is going to come your way. So have fun and be positive.
Love it. Haven't had that answer before from the corporate hippie.
Hearing it here first.
Excellent. I totally concur with you. Everything happens for a reason. And I did a little mini episode recently about your 20s are the time that you need to stuff up. That's the best time to have a risk, have a go, and it's messy. And at the time I was very driven. I still am very driven, but back then I was extra driven. And yeah, you're always afraid that you'll make the wrong mistake or you won't be where you should be. You're behind everyone else. But 9 times out of 10, that's the time that you want to. That's when you want to give it a crack, have a go, and realise that if you keep doing the right things, it'll work out.
Totally. Because the universe has got your back.
We say in our household, Sarah, to my daughter Sophie, whenever things aren't going so right, say, sweetheart, it's okay. It'll all work out. She goes, why, Dad? I said, because we're the lucky laws.
Love it.
Yeah.
That is such a bad comment. I love it.
Yeah. And then the other day we were going to get a car park and I was belly aching about all the tourists and how we wouldn't be able to get a car park. And she just leaned out from the back at 9 and she said, Dad, remember, we're the lucky laws. And I think that's a great way to look at the universe because there's things outside our control, but ultimately 9 times out of 10, it all works out for the best.
Totally.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for your time today. I think there's been a huge amount of wisdom you've shared in there, and I hope everyone listens and takes it on board and actually takes action because, as you mentioned, accountability and action is where results come from. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on here, Ben.
Well, it's always great having Sarah on the podcast. She's so articulate and got some great wisdom there, and it's just good to be able to talk to someone that sits in, a parent's seat, sits in a professional advisor's seat, and also sits in a rural producer's seat. I think it gives us a really unique perspective. So hopefully you've taken that in. Just a couple of quick things before we head off. Number one, if you haven't listened to Sarah's episode number 8, go back and have a listen to that. It's a really good episode. I've shared that with so many families about bringing the next generation in. I think it's a really good one that if you've got either the kids have come back to the farm or about to come back to the farm, it's just a good one to listen to. I'd highly recommend you go do that. It's very easy listening. Number 2 is don't leave end of financial year till too late. If you're going to do something, get in early because accountants are always busy, but use it as a catalyst to start having better conversations with your accountant. Talk to them about what your plans are. If you don't have a really clear 10-year plan or 2-year plan or a 5-year plan, just start to talk to them about where you generally want to go and start that process. As Sarah said, progress, not perfection. And finally, if you haven't started thinking about the future, maybe you need to actually start sitting down as a family and carving out some time. Super important. Sarah mentioned it at least a dozen times, and I probably mentioned it more, but sitting down as a family and having that conversation. We do it all the time in our roadmap workshops. We've got one coming up in August. We do those and you sit down in the room and then you have those conversations, and you'd be shocked how often when you actually invest the time to actually have a talk about the future, all those problems you're dealing with on a day-to-day are still there, but it lessens the problems. It brings the family together, and the ultimate goal is alignment, getting everyone on the same page. And when everyone's in the rowboat, a different analogy to Sarah's bus, when everyone's in the rowboat and everyone's rowing in the right direction, it's intoxicating and you get far more traction. So if this episode's been valuable, I'd love it if you'd share it with some family and friends that you've got out there. It's the way we share the wealth and wisdom with everyone else. And if people don't know about it, they can't listen and learn and do better. So that's it for today. I've taken up enough of your time. I'm Ben Law. I'm the financial bloke. And remember, it's more important who you are than what you've got. I'll see you next time.
The number one reason succession plans fail and family relationships are permanently damaged is a breakdown in communication. Because when families don't know how to have the hard conversations, trust erodes, resentment builds, and silence does the damage. The families who preserve wealth and protect relationships make succession look easy because they don't just focus on structure and strategies. They build the communication skills to make clear decisions, manage emotions, and protect trust before the pressure hits. That's why I use world-class communication expert Katie Godden in our high-performing families community. Katie's communication training program, Grassroots Communication, teaches the exact skills top families in ag use to increase trust, increase family alignment, and strengthen long-term relationships. If you want to get ahead of the game, head on over to katiegodden.com/grassroots and use the code AgriCoach for 15% off. Because the conversations you avoid today create the problems you inherit tomorrow.